joy to welcome you all here today. I see a lot of old friends that we've met through the years in our schools, and a lot of new friends as well. Now, a great many of you do know us well because you work in one of our 5 fabulous schools. And I would just like to take a moment to acknowledge your endless hard work and dedication to our students, and let everybody know what a tremendous job you do for our kids. So can we give it up just for a second for our staff of BCP School? Now, for those of you who don't know us well, the Baltimore Curriculum Project was founded 23 years ago by 2 people who are in this room, Bob Embry from the English Foundation and Dr. Neil Berkeley, who is currently on the Baltimore City School Board of Commissioners, and we are forever grateful to them both. BCP started off as an attempt to get effective tools in the hands of educators, and then support teachers and train them and monitor and give more support so that every kid could be successful. And we have remained quite focused on that initial mission of putting great tools in the hands of educators and providing support. But with the guidance of our world-class principals, Matt Hornbeck, Ron Ricketta, Mark Gaither, Harold Henry, and Bernard Qua, we've also grown in our capacity to support schools, families, and students. And it really was knowing what a complex and difficult job it is to successfully educate and nurture the next generation of leaders and citizens of the world that inspired today's topic. You're going to hear from some people who know what it takes to do this kind of work, and you're going to hear from some people who are doing the kind of work and doing it successfully. So we're really looking forward to hearing what our panelists have to say. I want to thank John McGill and all of our trainers and coaches for making this morning's sessions a great success. I've heard nothing but positive, glowing statements from the sessions this morning. And I want to thank Larry Shugam, Toby Morris, and Angela Scott for putting together this afternoon's event. BCP is extremely fortunate to have a deeply talented and supportive board of directors. And here today we have our board chair, George Hess, we have Debbie Ramsey, and Dhruv Niraja. Thank you guys for coming. Now I'm going to introduce our moderator, Dr. Sarah Warren. She comes to us from Baltimore City Public Schools, and we're delighted she's here because city schools has been and remains our most important partner in this work, and we're happy that she is here to help us through this discussion. You can read her bio, but I think if you read her bio, you will probably bet with me that she is the most extensively traveled person in the room today. It's really quite something. So it makes us all the more glad that she has landed in Baltimore. She claims to love Baltimore, says it has a small town feel, and we're happy she's here. So thank you, Mr. Warren.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the Baltimore Curriculum Project for the opportunity to be here. The City Schools is very happy to be part of this event. So good afternoon and welcome everyone. I'm honored to have the opportunity to moderate this esteemed panel of speakers. I'm also really honored to be here with all of you, a group of passionate, committed educators. Thank you for all of the hard but loving work that you do every day to support our students. Before I turn to the presentations, I just wanted to say a few words about the work that we're doing in Baltimore City Schools to nurture the whole child. So the first thing I want to drive everyone's attention to, if you haven't seen it yet, is that City Schools recently released a new document called Investing in Our Future, which was created under the visionary leadership of our CEO, Dr. Sonia Santelises. This is a detailed framework which lays out what City Schools believe are the comprehensive services and strategies that would be needed for us to create a truly world-class education system for all of our students across the entire system. One that addresses all of their needs, nurtures their intelligence and creativity, and allows them to pursue their academic and their extracurricular passions. If you're interested in reading, it's a good read. The document can be found on the City Schools website, and that's hot off the press, and I just gave Dr. Kirwan his official hard copy here, so I encourage you to read that. The other thing that I would encourage you to take a look at if you haven't already, and also can be found on the City Schools website, is our Blueprint for Success. It's called Building a Generation. So this is our 3-year vision and our strategy, essentially, for how we will support our students and improve student outcomes. And it has 3 key areas of focus: leadership, literacy, and student wholeness. Student wholeness is obviously particularly germane to the conversation today, and that happens to be the bucket of work that I lead. The vision for student wholeness is that our students are inspired to pursue their passions and reach their potential when schools provide engaging, safe, and supportive environments that foster well-being and meet academic, social, emotional, and physical needs. So I try to take myself back and look at this vision statement every now and then, because it really, I think, encapsulates in a powerful way the work that we're trying to do. Within that work, there are a few, I would say 3 key focus areas that we're working on. So the first being safe, welcoming, and joyful learning environments. And that is emphasizing the importance of creating an atmosphere where our students and our educators can be together, can feel safe, supported, and can build a strong community. So that's not only about the physical environment in our schools, but also about supporting positive behavior and trying to create a community that is built around restorative approaches and restorative practices. The second key area of work is healthy, connected, and supported students and adults. And that encompasses the work around social-emotional learning, as well as physical well-being, physical health. And then the third key area is engaged, enriched, and inspired learners. And that's where we get at the important work that needs to be done to ensure that we are meeting each student where they are, helping them to identify their individual passions and interests and strengths, and to pursue those with gusto. And it's also about making sure that our learning opportunities are engaging and fun so that our students want to come to school. We know that attendance is a critical predictor of student outcomes. And then finally, the robust family and community partnerships that we need to build and develop to make our work successful and to support our students are cross-cutting all of these areas of focus. So, one other thing I just wanted to address quickly before I move on is, well, first let me just say a little bit more about the way that we're actualizing this work. So some of you may have be aware of our intensive learning sites. So these are under student wholeness. We have 20 sites that are focused on social emotional learning. That means they're doing a deep dive into social emotional learning. And then there are an additional 15 schools that are doing a deep dive into work around restorative practices. And then furthermore, there are 20 more schools doing a deep dive into literacy. So these are just one aspect of our larger blueprint, but they are a very exciting piece of the work because it's where we're doing, essentially creating a learning lab for the district so that we can study and grow and learn together and have evidence, but also places that other schools can come to learn about the work and to challenge one another. So I know that there's a lot of this great work actually happening already as well in the BCP schools. And so I would love to see as we move forward more collaboration between our some of your schools and some of the intensive learning sites as well. So the other note I wanted to make is around trauma, because I hear a lot as I go around talking with people here about the trauma that is experienced in our city, experienced by our students. And that's very real and something that we need to be able to respond to if we are going to address student wholeness. And at the same time, I'm reminded of one of the key learnings that I had when I was studying trauma, and that is that trauma is a normal reaction to abnormal situations. And I try to keep coming back to that because it's a reminder that it's about the context and the events that people are experiencing. And so I think we have to be very careful not to pathologize when we're talking about trauma, because actually trauma is a normal reaction. What's not normal is what's going on around somebody who's feeling traumatized. So what does that mean for us as educators and for us as people who are trying to nurture student wholeness for the whole child? I think it means we have to then focus in on those abnormal circumstances. And we have to do the hard work and invest the resources to change the circumstances that are generating those traumatic experiences. It also means that we need to invest and support students in bolstering themselves and building up their own capabilities and their own resilience to be able to confront whatever they face now or into the future. And then third, I think it's upon us as educators to make sure we don't lose sight of the incredible strengths and assets that our students and our families and our communities come to us with. It's our job to nurture and cultivate those and to draw them out. And then I think finally, it's our job to help build a community and build a school system that really wrap around our students and wrap around our schools with the resources that they need to be successful and to wrap around them, frankly, with love and support. So, with that, I'm going to move on to our panelists. And first up is Dr. Kirwan. And I'm going to read his bio. So I have to confess, I've met a lot of celebrities over the years, and I'm usually not someone who is starstruck, but it just happens that with Dr. Kirwan, when I found out he was on the panel, I had that starstruck feeling, so bear with me. So, Dr. William E. Brit Kirwan is Chancellor Emeritus of the University System of Maryland. He is a recognized authority on critical issues facing higher education. He served as Chancellor of USM for 13 years, from 2002 to 2015, President of the Ohio State University for 4 years, 1998 to 2002, and President of the University of Maryland College Park for 10 years, from 88 to 98. Currently, Dr. Kirwan chairs the Conference Board of the Mathematical Sciences and serves as Executive Director of Transforming Post-Secondary Education in Mathematics. He also chairs the Maryland Commission on Innovation and Excellence in Education, appointed by Governor Hogan. Dr. Kirwan is past chair of, among other boards, the American Council for Higher Education, the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities, and the Knight Commission on Intercollegiate Athletics. Among Dr. Kirwan's many honors is the 2010 TIAA-CREF Theodore M. Hesburgh Award for Leadership Excellence. In 2009, he received the Carnegie Corporation Leadership Award. He was recently inducted into the Maryland Business and Civic Leaders Hall of Fame and was elected to membership in the American Academy of Arts and Sciences in 2002. Dr. Kirwan received his bachelor's degree in mathematics from the University of Kentucky in 1960 and his master's and doctoral degrees in mathematics from Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey, in 1962 and 1964, respectively. So, before he begins his official remarks, I have asked Dr. Kirwan, and I will ask each of the other panelists, to share thoughts about a particular adult in the school that they went to, could be any grade level. So an adult that was profound for you, someone with whom you had a profound connection that played an important role in your life and growth. It doesn't have to be a teacher, could be. And I'm gonna, while you do that, I will switch the slides.
Well, thank you, Sarah, for that very nice introduction. And the question you asked me is actually easy to answer because the person I always think of is Mrs. Cupid, who was my 10th grade geometry teacher. And in that class, I learned that you can actually take some axioms and prove a statement. I thought that was just unbelievable. And it imbued in me a love of mathematics that got me major in mathematics when I went to school, hopefully earned a PhD, and become a faculty member. And in a real sense, I owe my career to this phenomenal geometry teacher in the 10th grade. Okay, ready?
Oh, thank you, yeah. Yes, okay, so two sort of points of order. One, we're going to go one speaker at a time, and I will read the bio for each speaker as they come up. And then two, there will be people passing around cards if you haven't got one already, and you should write your questions on the cards and then pass them back, and we will handle questions at the end, okay?
Okay, thank you very much. So, what a privilege and honor to be here today, to have a chance to talk about the work of the commission, and to also to have two people on the panel who have actually had an impact on the work of the commission. First, I had an opportunity to visit Mark's Wolfe Street Academy, a community school here in Baltimore, and I was just amazed by the impact of being a community school and what it was doing on for the education of those students. And then secondly, Karen Weber, who has been a leading thinker about restorative practices. And we learned a lot about restorative practices on the commission and have taken some of that, what we learned, and put them into recommendations in our report. So these two people have both had a real impact on our work. So we've been working for 2 years, and I'm supposed to condense this work down into 20 minutes. So get ready. Here we go. I think most people know about this commission. It was created in the 2016 legislative sessions with two responsibilities, two major responsibilities. One was to update funding formulas that the state operates its K through 12 system on, and to develop policies and practices so that Maryland schools would perform at the level of the best performing schools, not in America, but in the world. So a tall order for sure. This commission, which is broadly representative, 25 members, you think of almost any entity that is invested in education, PTA, school boards, superintendents, MSDE, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, they had representation on the commission. So this is very broadly, the labor unions, collective bargaining units are all represented. So the first thing this commission did, many of us were not experts in K-12 education, we're going to make recommendations on Maryland schools being among the best in the world. Where are Maryland schools now? And the harsh reality that we had to come to face with is that in terms of learning outcomes, forget rankings that say such and such a state has the best of the top 5 schools in the U.S. Let's talk about learning outcomes, assessments of what students are actually learning. Isn't that really how you would measure the quality of a school? Well, here's some troubling information. Many of you in the audience will know about this, but for those who don't, NAEP, in National Assessment of Education Progress, is an exam mandated by the federal government, same exam given in every 50 states to 4th and 8th graders in reading and math. And so there are 50 states, you'll recall, and you can see where we rank on the NAEP scores. Now this is Maryland. This isn't any particular school district. This is Maryland. Well, that would be bad enough. So we're very much middle of the pack at best. So that would be bad enough if the U.S. was this shining city on the hill with the best education system in the world. But it's not. The PISA exam is a respected exam given to advanced economies around the world. Last 2015, it was 72 countries. 15-year-olds given exams in reading, math, and science. You can see where the U.S. stands. So the commission starts with the fact that Maryland schools perform at a mediocre level in a country that performs at a mediocre level nationally. And we want to perform at the level of the best performing countries in the world. That's a tall order. But that's not all we want. Think about this. Fewer than 40% of high school graduates are assessed as college and career ready by the state's own assessment
when they leave high school. That means, see, I'm a mathematician, I'll tell you this, that means 60% are not. Now think about that. The overhead, when you're sending kids to college and they're not college and career ready, guess what they take? Remedial work. That costs money. And if a kid leaves high schools and goes straight to the workforce, they're not prepared for the work. So there's overhead on industry, the private sector, getting their employees up to speed. Maryland also has very large achievement gaps based on income, race, disability, and other factors. That tends to be true across the country. The issue of schools serving concentrations of poverty is not restricted to any one jurisdiction. It occurs all across our state. Here was maybe one of the most troubling facts the Commission learned, that Maryland education funding, when you combine state and local, is among the most regressive in the U.S. Now, we think of Maryland as a progressive state, so this was extremely troubling to the members of the Commission, as it should be to all the citizens in the state. This means that districts with high proportion of low-income students receive less funding than school districts serving wealthier communities. Now, that's not the way the high performers do. They invest much more money in schools serving high concentrations of poverty because they understand the impact of poverty on the education process. Also, Maryland ranks 11th in per student K through 12 spending. You might say 19th if you factor out regional cost differences. So, we're okay on spending, but we're not at the top. We can afford to spend more money. We are, after all, by some measures, the wealthiest state in the nation. We also learned that average salaries in Maryland are 25% below those of professions with comparable degrees. So what does this mean? Teaching tends to be, we have a number of dedicated teachers who stay in teaching and do a superb job. But overall, teaching is a revolving door. People go into teaching, they spend a few years there, they can't make enough money for their families, they leave, either go into administration or they leave teaching altogether, leave education altogether. We particularly have gaps in teacher shortages in STEM areas. And another troubling factor is 60% of our teachers are recruited from outside the state. Now, why is that a particular problem? Well, our teacher preparation programs prepare students in the state to teach the Maryland curriculum. And if you're recruiting people from outside the state, they haven't had that training. Moreover, it's much more expensive to recruit people from outside the state. And I think, I hardly need to say this to this audience, but I think we all understand that the economic future of any jurisdiction, any state, any nation depends upon, the economy that we live in today, on highly educated, well-skilled workforce. And the other piece is on the individual basis, and this almost makes it a moral responsibility on our state. There is no way today to get out of poverty if a kid doesn't have a good education. Without providing a quality education to our children who are living in poverty, we are basically relegating them to a life in generational poverty. That should not be tolerated. So how did the Commission then go about its work? If we're supposed to make recommendations so we perform at the level of the best performing systems in the world, we worked with an organization called the National Center for Education and the Economy. It's a think tank in Washington, D.C. It's highly regarded. It has spent the last 20 years studying the elements of high-performing school systems in countries around the world. And what they've learned, based on this, they have developed the building blocks of high-performing systems. And what's amazing is that these high performers exist in different economies, different cultures, different circumstances, serving different populations, but they all adhere to these building blocks. And so what the Commission did is a really deep dive, rigorous detailed gap analysis comparing what Maryland does on these building blocks versus what these high performers do. Now, we threw in 3 U.S. States just to make some comparisons within the U.S. One of these is actually a high performer. I'll say something about that in a second, and that's Massachusetts. But it's important to know that we are the first state to actually undertake this kind of deep dive analysis on what makes the best performers in the world work and compare it to what we're doing in this state. So out of this analysis, we came up with 5 major policy areas. And maybe in the Q&A I can go into some depth about more detail on each of these. But the first is, I'll say a word or two about each. The first is to invest significantly in early childhood education. So we're recommending full day preschool for all low-income 3- and 4-year-olds. But more than that, we are calling for a significant expansion of the family resource centers. These are very valuable assets. There just aren't enough of them. And they exist to help young families, young mothers, both pre- and postnatal, in low-income areas, understand parenting and nutrition. We've also recommended a significant expansion of the Judy Centers. Judy Centers are a similar resource that supports young children from the age 3 to 5. Transforming teaching into a high-status profession. Sadly, we have some very good and dedicated teachers in our state, but sadly, teaching is not thought of as a high-status profession in Maryland or anywhere else in the United States, for that matter. And in all of the high performers, it is. So this is going to be a huge lift for us as a state, but this is what we need to do if we want to perform as well as the best. So what are we calling for here? An elevation, and this is pointing the finger at the teacher preparation programs. They've got to do a better job in preparing teachers for the classrooms they will enter, bringing restorative practices into the curriculum, teaching cultural competence, improving their disciplinary knowledge, raising certification standards to become a teacher, creating a career ladder, a performance-based career ladder, so that good teachers can advance in their careers and stay as teachers. That's what we need to do to keep the good teachers in the classroom. And once all of that is implemented, then pay teachers, benchmark their salaries against other professions that require similar levels of education. Ensure all students provide a rigorous curriculum benchmark to international standards, leading to college and career and industry certified workforce credentials. The big idea here is to move the college and career ready standard, currently at the 11th grade, down to the 10th grade, and build the support systems along the way to keep kids on track so that they're college and career ready in the 10th grade. And then in the 11th and 12th grade, we can do some really meaningful things with them. They can take an advanced placement pathway. They can do early college, maybe earn a 2-year degree when they graduate from high school. Or they could pursue a rigorous career and technical education track developed in partnership with the private sector that would include apprenticeships and get kids an industry-recognized credential and access right out of high school to a very high-paying job. There are plenty of them if we just train them, give them the right education in high school. The 4th bullet addresses this equity issue. Ensure all students are successful by providing significantly more support. In particular, for schools serving high concentrations of poverty. We have in Maryland, and we will have with our recommendations, a compensatory funding. If a kid is comes from a low-income family, there is additional funds provided for that kid. And that will continue to be in our recommendations. But the new idea in the commission is we recognize that there's a big difference between a school, say, serving 30% low-income kids and a school serving 80% low-income kids. So there is an extra allocation of funds depending upon the degree of concentration of poverty. That will enable these schools to add additional resources, after-school academic programs, summer academic programs, wraparound services, counseling, healthcare services in these schools that are so badly needed. And finally, they establish a rigorous governance and accountability. You know, I've given some version of this talk maybe 50 times around the state. And everybody's saying, oh, we love the first 4. But how do we know that if we do these things, we'll get the results you're talking about? If we don't have rigorous accountability, we won't get the public support to make this happen. So the commission believes it has built a rigorous accountability system and put one in place that will establish an independent oversight board to ensure that the recommendations are faithfully implemented and produce the results that we expect. More about that in the questions if you would like. So where's the current status of the commission? We've completed our detailed recommendations and provided the total costs. We have a detailed implementation plan for these recommendations, and with costs rising over the 10-year implementation, in the 10th year, the additional cost would be $3.8 billion, state and local combined. The commission is now producing a report. It's at the printer that will go to the governor and the General Assembly by the end of the month. Now, we got a letter from the presiding officers saying basically that it would not be possible for the General Assembly in a 90-day session to both deal with these policy issues and the distribution of funding between the state and the county and identify a revenue source in 90 days. It just can't be done. So they have asked the commission to come back and work on a recommendation for how the cost should be distributed between the state and the locals, which we will do this summer, give it to the General Assembly in the fall, and then that will complete our work. But we've also made recommendations. The General Assembly set aside some funds for fiscal year 20, $325 billion. We are suggesting should be spent to jumpstart our recommendations, and we have made those recommendations to the General Assembly. So the recommendations, we are urging the General Assembly this session. A lot of people say, oh, well, we don't have to wait the 2020 session. No, don't think that way. This 2019 session is critical. We want to pass the Commission's policy framework. We want to allocate the $325 million that's been set aside to jumpstart the Commission's recommendations. And we want the General Assembly to reserve $750 million for fiscal year 21, which would be the first year, the state's portion of the first year funding. My final thoughts. Okay, so the Commission has developed a report, and I have high confidence, just based on the logic that my teacher, Ms. Fugan, taught me in geometry. If we do this, make these recommendations, we will have a high-performing system in the United States. It'll be the envy of the country and as good as among the best in the world. But the question is, will the state have the resolve to make this happen? And so Massachusetts is a good example. I mentioned the PISA exam. Massachusetts did something like what we've done with the Commission some years ago, and back in the 80s. And they put in some, but not all of our recommendations. And they got fabulous results. If they, in the PISA exam, if they were a country, they would rank in the top 5 in the world. But they have, unfortunately, large achievement gaps in Massachusetts. We think our recommendations address that issue. So my question to the state is, if Massachusetts can make this kind of progress, by golly, why can't Maryland? So I just think we're at a very critical moment for our state. You know, we can go on like we are, doing what we're doing. You saw the results. 40% college and career ready when they leave high school. The middle of the pack on the NAEP scores. We can keep that up. Maybe make some incremental improvements. Is that what we want for Maryland? Or we can be bold, make these dramatic changes, and create a bright future for the children and the citizens of our state. Thank you very much.
Wow. Have you ever heard anyone that could preach about education policy? That was amazing. Thank you. And I think I can say on behalf of all of us that we're hugely grateful for the work that you're leading because it's sorely needed. So we appreciate it. Okay. So again, a reminder that if you have questions, you should be putting those onto your cards and those will be collected. So we're going to take questions at the end. Oh, I see some already arriving. Good. Okay. So we're going to go on to our next speaker. And I am, of all the people on the panel here, Karen is the one that I know from before, and in fact was one of the first people that I met when I came to city schools. She used to have something that sort of approximated my job, so she's been a great resource for me. But she is also, in her role at OSI, an incredible partner to us, and she has really spearheaded hugely important work around restorative practices. And OSI is a funder and supporter and leader in this work in city schools. So the official story. Karen Weber is the director of OSI Baltimore's Education and Youth Development Program, which aims to foster the creation of inclusive and engaging schools and programs that provide students with the resources and support needed to succeed in school and into adulthood. Previously, Ms. Weber served as the Executive Director of the Office of Student Support and Safety for Baltimore City Public Schools, where she drove policies and practices that contributed to dramatic decreases in student suspensions and expulsions. Karen also served as a teacher, resident principal, and transformational principal of a Baltimore City middle high school, where she piloted restorative approaches to education. Prior to her career in education, she earned her law degree from the University of Texas School of Law and focused on civil rights. Karen also held various leadership positions in New York City government and served as the executive director of the Public Justice Center in Baltimore and the Open Housing Center in New York. So I'm going to ask you to answer the same question that I asked Dr. Kirwan, which is, who is that adult in your school that you had a really special connection with?
Can you hear me? So first of all, I need everyone's sympathy because I have to follow Brit. Second of all, I'll answer the question and say that it wasn't until I got to college and there was a dean there named Dean Moynihan. And Dean Moynihan had done a lot of studies on his own about sort of the Irish situation, what happened to people from Ireland when they came to the United States and America. And through that lens, he helped me as a young person grapple with issues that I was facing as a Black American woman in a majority white circumstance. Having come from New York City, where you meet the people of all types, and first going to Colgate University, where there were students who had never met or had friendships with Black folks, and all the questions I got, and in the process of trying to develop yourself anyway, I think that Dean Moynihan helped me see from a broader perspective what the human condition is. So the African American condition is punctuated by the fact that we're identifiable forever. So by my skin color, the assumption is that I'm a descendant of slaves. And whereas Irish and other groups can meld into this great society without any further ado. But having had that conversation with someone who's in a position of authority, who took the time to try to keep me at home and get me sort of situated so that I could manage, changed my life. in my work, in civil rights, human rights, and in
Okay, your slides are ready. Thank you.
So one of the questions I get often is, what is OSI? And the Open Society Institute is one of the offices of George Soros, who some of us may know here in the room. And it's the only city-based office that focuses on one area. So we focus on Baltimore City. And in my portfolio, my focus is on education. And I feel really, really honored to be in that position because I have the direct experience, having been in the school system, Baltimore City Public Schools, for some 12 years in various capacities. These are the other areas that we focus on in our office too, and they're all interrelated in terms of trying to lift us up as a city. So one of the reasons, like I want to just point out this issue of focusing on race and poverty, and Brit and I did not coordinate our PowerPoints, but these are the issues that face us in Baltimore City. And even though people think of Baltimore City as a poor city, 24% of our population do live in poverty, which is twice the national average. However, there are tons of people who don't. That being said, in terms of our school system, approximately 85% of our students live in poverty. And the reason that's relevant, different folks have already pointed to the fact that many of our students experience trauma. The neighborhoods that they come from have experienced mass incarceration. When I was a teacher, there was almost no child in my classrooms who had not either experienced or knew of someone very close to them who had not only experienced mass incarceration, being incarcerated for something trivial, but also gun violence and other types of ills that children bring into the school with them. So what does it look like in a classroom? Anxiety, attention deficit, impulse control, aggression, and these are all things that teachers have to manage without any tools necessarily. And not to bang on the teacher prep programs, but in a school system where 85% of the children live in poverty, not to have tools at your disposal to handle the types of behaviors that are in your classrooms lead to the school to prison pipeline. Because if you don't have any experience with seeing a child go from 0 to 100 in 5 seconds flat because they've been triggered, you're going to want them out of your space. And so that's what we see happening over and over again. So the other issue is one of race. About 80% of our student body is African American, and the growing body of students are Latino, which would make about 90% of our students of color. But I want to be specific about African Americans and talk about the influence of race on punishment. There's a theory that's been very well documented called the racial threat theory. And what it theorizes is that wherever there are large groups of African American people, the reaction to their presence is control and punishment. And one of the things I want to make clear about that theory is that it's not just white folks who have that reaction. We're all taught to have that reaction. There's been more recent studies done in schools, and what they found is that those schools that have large populations of African Americans specifically are much less likely to have any restorative measures used in their schools. And I mean parent conferences. We're not even talking circles and effective statements. We're talking parent conferences, conferences with teachers and children. Restorative practices are not evident in those schools. And so what does that do? Obviously, that sets the school up to be more like a prison. So instead of preparing children for college and career readiness, we're preparing them for prison. And so, why restorative practices?
Well, they're proven benefits, and our most recent research is so exciting. The RAND study just came out, and I don't know how someone did it, but I did see an article where someone was trying to show that the RAND study says that restorative practices don't work. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen. What they actually said was that there's improved graduation rates, reduced suspensions, increased attendance, improved teacher-student relationships, and that's from the perspective of the teachers, and decreased disproportionality, which is one of the things that has eluded us so often. Even when suspensions go down, the disproportionality remains the same, and we've seen that with students with special education, and also students who are African American or other children of color. The other thing I just want to flag is the Maryland Commission on the School to Prison Pipeline and Restorative Practices. Their report just came out, and it's also wonderful. It completely supports what RAND found as well. So we've got the research. So the people who come to you and say, well, there's no proof that it works. First of all, there's so many people in this room who are the proof that it works. But beyond that, we also have the research at this time. So just to go over it again, most of the people in this room already know what restorative practices are for, but the number one thing in terms of restorative practices is to build community. And we need community in our schools. We want children to want to come to school because people do vote with their feet. And the older they get, the more likely they are to decide whether they're coming to school or not based on what the school is providing them. So restorative practices build community. And this is what people often think in terms of, oh, I'll do it as a side thing, and we'll use restorative practices just to resolve conflict. Well, if you haven't been using it in the classroom, it's really not going to work to resolve your conflicts either. It has to be a whole school approach. And then the last thing, and I have some friends in the audience, I don't see them right now, but I have a friend in the audience specifically who uses restorative practices to enhance instruction. If you've got the kids engaged in a circle, why not embed your instructional practice with that methodology? It's fantastic. And I think as we get more proficient as a district, that's the direction that we're going to move in. But I also want to give a shout out to BCP because they're the leaders in this work. They're the ones we can point to and say, if you don't know what this should look like, go to City Springs, go to Hempstead Hill, go to Wolfe Street. We've got it happening right here in Baltimore City with our own children. And this is just a plug. I wanted to make this statement that no one should think that restorative practices is in conflict with any other structure you have in place. So if you use PBIS, if you have mediation, if you're using mindfulness, all of these can go together. The only thing that it really isn't very supportive of is a punitive attitude and yelling and screaming at children, not listening to children. So those things don't go together, but I don't think that's what any of us are trying to achieve. Those of us who are using practices that are restorative can also use restorative practices with ease. And, so I do want to show a video, and what I'd like you to do, I'm going to sort of set the video up a little bit. It is a video of children in a restorative check-in circle at Hempstead Hill. The Teachers Democracy Project made a series of videos for us of children here in Baltimore, and the reason we asked them to do that is because we found that in the restorative practices videos, the only people talking were the adults. Oh, I think it's great, my class is great now. We have no idea what the children are saying. So in these, we have a series of videos that we're going to make available to everyone in the audience that look at the children actually having the circle. What I'd like you to do as you watch the video is just make notes, your reactions, your thoughts, and then I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. Okay, sir.
a challenge you had? Your circle question for today is, what is a challenge that you have encountered during 6th grade this year? And how did you overcome that challenge? So how did you persevere through it? Now, this might be an academic challenge. It might be a personal challenge that you feel safe sharing. It might be a challenge socially that you had. I'll give you a couple minutes to think about that, not a couple minutes, but I'll give you a bit to think about that. What is a challenge you had to overcome? And how did you overcome that challenge this year?
A challenge that I had to persevere through was during math class when I didn't understand something that we were learning, and what I did was I went home and got online and started taking practice tests about it and learning.
I think something is more personal, but my dad getting married, because I was okay with it, but it was still kind of hard just to come to terms also with my parents just getting the divorce agreement, and it was just hard, and now we're waiting for my step-siblings, for the documents and others that they can officially live with us.
During talk, I was struggling a lot, so I persevered by doing my best and studying the week before.
The challenge that I've had during the school year is balancing my homework with other stuff. I persevered by going to coach class.
Well, one struggle I had in 6th grade was keeping my leadership percentage up. So not getting in trouble, because in the beginning of the year, I was getting in a lot of trouble. My percentage was really low, and I missed out on 3 trips. But then I started to pay attention to class more and not get in trouble. And also my GPA, I've gotten up a lot lately.
The challenge that I had to overcome in 6th grade was my depression. And the way I did it was by avoiding all of the bullying. And another challenge was my grades, because they were really low, and I started to focus more on
A challenge I persevered through was hard, because during breakfast I would get really doubtful with myself and I would just want to give up. This might sound really weird, but I wrote my parents' wedding song down on the scratch sheet of paper, and because that kind of relaxes me, even though they're divorced.
Something that I struggle with is keeping my grades up, because I feel like lots of people expect me to get straight A's and everything like that, because everybody my family and stuff, they're very pushy. So if I had a B on a report card or something, then they'd be pretty mad at me. Then I'd have to push myself harder and harder and harder to get my grades up really high, so that I stayed on track.
I've had a lot of trouble with getting sleep. I limited myself from using my tablet, and instead of going to sleep at 2 a.m. or 1 a.m., I started to go to 11 p.m., which is a lot better for me. Looks like really big stuff.
I had a lot of trouble, kind of growing up, it's just weird, going through all the stuff that you go through. Puberty's been hard for me, because I still understand the things that we're going through. There's so many good teachers that taught me everything. And I also had a problem with my sister. We get
want to share the fact I'm talking with my parents. I'm talking with my parents because I haven't taken too much movie yet. It's this year it was like what shocked me saying like mentally strong, like not giving up, like halfway through the year because.
All right, stop it. But I think it's better to leave you hanging so you look at the videos. What we originally were going to do was do a turn and talk, but I think we're pretty much out of time. We may have a couple of minutes. But I did want people to give general impressions. Are there people in the audience who could give general impressions of what did you see here? What did you hear? And what are some of your thoughts?
Well, we identified a lot of non-verbally, so they didn't give a respect to the speaker. And so whenever they identified with something that the speaker was saying, they related with it, they did a little hand gesture. And I thought that was really cool because it allows the speaker a chance to finish their thought while also being able to see people identify.
Excellent. Thank you. We'll bring it back. I'm sorry, the blue shirt, yes?
I noticed that I'm a Baltimore County, and we've been trying to sort of practice and I don't think we're doing such a great job doing it, like how we explain it in the classroom and how that would actually benefit a lot of our students.
Thank you. Please take that information back to Baltimore County. Your other hands, yes, in the hat, and then the young lady here.
One of the things that I noticed is that at least 4 or 5 students do work for a year, and I know that that's one of the school values. And so now it's actually being transformed into conversation in front of school culture.
Thank you.
I thought it was such a confirmation of how perceptive children are and how much they do understand about what's going on around them and how it relates to themselves.
Are there any comments all the way in the back?
What amazed me is how these children had to feel so safe in that environment to be able to open their hearts and what they did. That's impressive, because at that age, I would have never told anyone that.
Well, these are my 2 wrap-up comments. First of all, it teaches articulation and self-awareness by doing this every day. You could tell from this video that this is not the first time they've stood in a circle. This is the practice of the school. The other thing I'll say is that we think of restorative practices as being for children. It's also for the adults. Is there anybody in that circle that you would not have empathy for? Even if they act out the next day, the one who's been depressed, the one who's going through jealousy issues with her sister. These are now people you develop empathy and relationships with. And with that, I'll close. I will say that this video and everything will be made available to you. We have a slide where all the videos are embedded, as well as the reports that we mentioned, and all of that information will be made available to you. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much, Karen. And thank you for bringing the engaging pedagogy to the mix. Great, so next we turn to Principal Mark Gaither. Principal Gaither has led Wolfe Street Academy for the past 14 years. Wolfe Street is a Baltimore City public conversion charter school in Southeast Baltimore, operated by BCP. Over 80% of the school students receive free and reduced meals, and 80% of its students speak another language other than English at home. With a focus on finding and retaining great educators, providing them with proven curriculum, and supporting the whole child through the community school strategy, Wolfe Street Academy went from the 77th to the 2nd highest performing elementary school under the previous state standardized test. Just based on that, I'm assuming you'll have questions for Principal Gaither at the end of this. That's incredibly impressive. Wolfe Street Academy has consistently outperformed the Baltimore City average on the PARCC assessment, and most recently was recognized as a 4-star school by the Maryland State Department of Education. Mr. Gaither lives in Baltimore with his wife and 2 sons. What this bio left out, and in my mind the most important piece of information, which I found on the school website, is that Principal Gaither is an alum of Haverford College outside of Philadelphia, which is also my alma mater. So, do we have any other Haverford alums in the room? All right, well, I want all of you to send your students to Haverford. So I'm going to ask you the same question I've asked everyone else. Who was that one adult that made a big difference for you?
Well, I don't want to, there were a lot of teachers, a lot of principals, names just kind of kept coming to mind. And I don't want to be a downer on this, but actually I'm going to give a non-example of something that happened to me, where I had a math teacher, and I raised my hand, and I really enjoyed figuring things out. And I said, well, what does that linear combination, where you get an answer like 3i plus 4j or something like that? Haverford is not a mathematics kind of given. What does that mean? What does it represent? And I asked that question in class in front of my peers, and he said, don't worry about it. Just get the answer and give it to me in that form. And I could do linear combinations until the cow came home. I mean, it wasn't hard to do. I could go through the steps. But I remember that moment as one of the moments where I thought, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this math thing. And it was many years later, actually, when I became a 5th grade math teacher, that I rediscovered kind of the joys of math and what it meant to me as both an educator and a person. And actually last night, my 6th grader had to figure out what 2 integers added together were 100 more than the previous 2 consecutive integers. And the whole family sat around with a piece of paper figuring this out. And we all got it wrong until he got it right. And so the power that we have as educators to do good, to do evil, is significant. So, hope that wasn't too much.
I assume you're going to uplift us with your actual presentation.
Let me tell you about this place a little bit now. Okay, well, thank you, first of all, for having the opportunity to talk. Principals like that opportunity to speak to people and tell them what they think. One of the things that has struck me that isn't directly in here, but just watching that video, seeing the trust in the kids that are in that video, and listening to the other panelists speak, is the power and strength of relationships. And BCP, the 5 schools, you all in your classrooms, do this every day. And what we got here right now, I mean, the past, however long we've been in here, hour and a half or so, is another example of that. Because what it is going to take to make what Dr. Kirwan spoke about a reality is relationships. And people working together to get something done because it's the right thing to do. And it's going to take schools, that's you all, it's going to take society, our organizations like OSI, the folks out there who care about what happens to their community. It's going to take policymakers, and I applaud BCP for bringing these people together in a room, particularly at this critical time when Kirwan is setting up a generational funding formula. And I'm sorry, Dr. Kirwan, when I say Kirwan, I'm not being impolite or anything, I'm referring to the commission. But when the Kirwan Commission is setting up a generational funding formula that is going to directly impact every day of our lives for the next 15 years. And every day of the lives of all of the people that we touch every day. So that's how important this is. And frankly, in my opinion, there's nothing more important. Now, what you all do every day
is extremely complex. Talk about professionalizing the role of a teacher. You know, what we do compared to what a lot of folks out there who are paid more money and get the publicity, we manage, I'll take one of my classrooms, 28 kids a day for 8 hours. In terms, and when I say manage, I'm talking about what they are presented with, how they respond to that, how they respond to responses from their peers to that, how they are thinking about what happened at home. That is an extremely complex thing to do. So if anybody ever says to you, oh, I would run the school more like a business, well, we don't turn off the assembly line at night and the cog waits for us until we come the next day and turn the assembly line back on. Our cogs go home and they become new parts before they come back to us the next day. So don't let anybody tell you that it's simple, because it's extremely complex. What BCP has tried to do over the years is provide, as Laura said, the tools. I think maybe all of us mentioned at one point or another the idea of providing the tools to you all. And we've known what those tools are for many years. And what I see BCP doing with all 5 schools, having a designated person to handle non-academic issues that children bring to school. What I see BCP doing is getting the tool chest finally full. Finally with the things that we need to make a difference. So Wolfe Street. There has been, I'll just mention this, a school there since 1852. I'm not going to go year by year. There's been a school there since 1852 serving new immigrant populations that come in through the Port of Baltimore that entire time, that bring unique challenges, that bring unique strengths. And it's been a public school, and I will say to everybody, whoever thinks that a charter school in Maryland is not a public school, is still a public school. Right. And we serve those kids in that neighborhood because they're there, not because they filled out an application or can get across the city. We've been a community school since '06, a conversion charter since '07. We've had extensive after-school programs where we serve 65 to 85% of our kids with a free after-school 3-hour program. Pre-K through 5, about 250 kids. I see that little asterisk there next to the farms rate. I had to put that there a couple of years ago because they, in my opinion, started counting poverty wrong, particularly when it comes to immigrant populations who are not directly certified. But we're about 88% poverty, 80% speaking Spanish, and 50% receiving ESOL services in the school. There are 2 leading indicators of students being at risk of failure: living in poverty and speaking another language besides English in the home. So in a 10-year period that was mentioned about the improvement that Wolfe saw, 80% of our kids had both of those indicators. But because we had the right tools, partially because of BCP, partially because of restorative practices, we were able to basically defy the odds. Because in that 10 years, we got more students who spoke Spanish and more students who lived in poverty, yet our test scores went up. And so the idea that with the right tools, this can be done is key. So here's the challenge. Now, I thought I might have seen some students coming in from Hopkins or from elsewhere. Maybe some folks remember from their own educations. Who knows what name is connected with this? There you go. Maslow's hierarchy of need. Basically what it says is to get this top block, this blue triangle at the top, you have got to have the things at the bottom where the pyramid doesn't stand. And that is what pretty much universally society would define as successful, as a useful member of society. And this block, achievement, that's where you throw in a good student, test scores, that's achievement. Respect for others and for yourself, that's what we are looking for. But to the point when we didn't have or didn't recognize the value of the bottom of this triangle, we were trying to climb to the top without touching the bottom. And what community schools has done, that third wholeness, educating the whole child approach, is that it has started to address these issues. The issues that prevent kids from being available for the learning you have. So this is our mission and vision. We are doing our serve this year. I'm sure that anybody with these t-shirts on in the audience should be able to quote this, and they can show you their tattoo. But what we do is we combine these three things: great people, great programs, and great strategies. Without those three legs of the stool, it will not stand. Now, BCP is a key partner with us in this, as is the University of Maryland, who, can I say that at Hopkins? The University of Maryland, yes, Dr. Kirwan, who is our community school partner. But we take these three pieces, and great people you all know about. There you are. Look to the left, look to the right. Those are the great people. At Wolfe, we put 99% of our budget goes directly into staffing. There you go. And it goes into training that staff and retaining that staff, finding that staff in the first place. And without that, some fancy projector thing isn't going to do a thing. A great teacher with a piece of chalk can do more than a mediocre teacher with a fancy projector. And they can particularly do that combined with the other two legs of the stool of great programs and great strategies. So great programs, direct instruction. It is the proven program that is effective. There isn't anything else out there that has the data to show it works. Now, is it a silver bullet? No. It takes great people, go back to that one, to implement it with intelligence and integrity to make it work. Because programs don't teach kids. Great people with great programs teach kids. And then great strategies, which maybe is the thing that focuses in the greatest amount in terms of educating the whole child. We know there's an entire institute, which I'm going to mess up the name of, the one you talked about, Dr. Kirwan, ECC, the 6 building blocks.
Oh, the National Center of Education, NCAA.
The NCAA, I have too many E's and too few C's. They know they have studied what makes for quality education. Direct instruction, University of Oregon has studied what makes good instruction. But when you need to take that stuff and make the kids available, these are the things that, in my estimation, I've come to understand are essential. When community schools approached Wolfe Street, pushed against it. I saw my first community school coordinator somewhere here in the audience, and she came to me 12 years ago or 13 years ago and said, let's do this. And I said, I'm not sure I want to do this. I got a lot on my plate. But because we tried it, because we had great people doing it, we found that it worked, because it developed these bottom two items here, a trust and a deep engagement with the community. Now, my school is just, our zone is just to the north of Hampstead, just to the east of City Springs, and where our zones actually touch each other. But the communities of those three different schools are extremely different. What community schools and what truly trying to educate the whole child and not just applying a program of what they need, but finding out what they need, allows us to give this hyper-local attention to the needs of that specific community. Because what my families need is not what City Springs necessarily needs. There's overlap, but it's not the same thing. And same thing with Hampstead, Frederick, or Govins. And so having somebody at the school to address these hyper-local needs of the school is essential. And my hope for the new funding formulas in the state is that there are concentrations of poverty across the state, as Dr. Kirwan said. If you put a community school coordinator in every one of those schools that is centered in a concentration of poverty, that person can make the personal relationship connections to that community. Maybe it's access to health care on the Eastern Shore, because hospitals are so few and far between. Maybe it's, there was a politician from DC who came to Wolfe, said that they've got a lot of gang activity around this one school. It's that for them. But they'll be able to address those needs across a very diverse state. Nobody can do it alone. It takes many hands. And one of the great strengths of the approach that I think PCP and hopefully the district and hopefully Maryland will take on this is recognizing the strengths of partnerships. Wolfe did it because we had other people working with us. And these are just a few of the folks that work with us, whether it's funding partners or whether it's people coming in and doing theater classes with our kids. These are the folks that made it happen. These are also the folks that when funding is threatened can come out and say no. Can go to a politician and say, no, you need to fund after-school programs. You need to fund community schools. So the diversification of the leadership and of the partnerships here is key. Okay, well, I gotta show that. So, Schoolhouse Rock, conjunction and what? That one piece, there's this part where they're teaching about or, and but, and there's this or that. That does not work anymore. This is what's been going on for years, and this schoolhouse, if you're talking or, does not rock. This is what we need, this and that. We need great teachers, great programs, and great strategies. I'm going to skip forward. You all already heard about some of that. My mom would get upset with me that I'm dashing over the results, but because I want to show this. WIDA, not the ESOL test. Sorry, a little trauma to a few teachers in the room. WETA, the public television in DC came and did a piece on us. And so I just wanted to share this. It's 3 minutes, Larry. It will. Glad to see you today. Good morning, sir.
It's 8 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, and about 40 parents have gathered in the cafeteria at Wolfe Street Academy. For most urban elementary schools, this would be a terrific turnout for a quarterly PTA meeting. At this public school in Baltimore, it happens every day. Okay, that's different. Free groceries for any parent who wants them. and kids will all get their teeth checked for cavities today.
Okay, let's get people out of here for the day.
Welcome to what's known in education circles as a community school, where the school serves as a hub for providing healthcare, social services, and family support, in addition to the core academic curriculum. There may now be as many as 5,000 community schools in the U.S., roughly 5% of all public schools. Running one can be a big job.
When the possibility was first brought up with me about being a community school, I was the reluctant principal. I hemmed and I hawed and I thought, this is going to be one more thing for me to watch over. I've got a school that's failing. I've got parents who don't bring the kids to school, and now you want me to watch out over all this other stuff.
10 years ago, Wolfe Street Academy ranked 77th among 100 public elementary schools in Baltimore. Almost every child was poor. 65% spoke little or no English when they arrived. Many families had trouble just putting food on the table.
The difficulty comes that families who are working through jobs aren't making enough, don't have the types of insurance, don't have the access to transportation that they might need in order to provide these basic needs for their family.
Giselle Lundy Ponce is with the American Federation of Teachers, which represents educators in urban school districts like Baltimore.
Poverty is not inconsequential to teaching and learning. It's tightly connected to what happens to a child in school. It is no accident that wealthier communities have higher levels of academic achievement.
Wolfe Street tries to provide almost everything a child needs in order to be academically successful.
I have on my board in my office printed out a really nice copy of it in color of Maslow's hierarchy of need. And at the very fundamental level in that pyramid, before you get to academic achievement and self-actualization and all that, you have shelter and food and love and security. If you don't have those things, you cannot achieve anything else at all. So, let's get that off the screen. So it's about the kids. And we know what to do. We just have to find the will to do it. Thank you.
There was lots of rich thought there, and we have a number of questions. So I will put a disclaimer out there right now. There were several questions that were for me and city schools. So I think we probably need to have a separate conversation so that I can answer some of those questions. But my goal today is to make sure you get to hear from these fine folks. So I will not directly address the questions that are specific to me, but I will maybe try to pull them into some of our questions for the panelists. Okay. So I'm going to start with this question, which I love. I think this is a question, unless I'm misreading the handwriting, for Dr. Kirwan. How can we help fund the Kirwan Rex recommendations? And maybe we can even broaden that a little bit to ask how could people here in the audience, how can those of us in the community support adoption and funding of these recommendations?
Well, obviously, I love that question. Glad you asked. And in order for something of this magnitude to take place, and it is going to be an increased investment on the part of people in the state to make this happen. It's going to take a groundswell of support across the state. People have to see that this is important to their future, the future of their children and their grandchildren, and have their voices heard. Now, there are fortunately a number of groups, interest groups around the state, who are forming coalitions to have their voices heard and enacted to our elected officials to let them know how important this is. And one of those groups is an organization called Strong Schools Maryland. Some of you may have heard of it. I think it's one of its founder, or one of its founders, is sitting right here, David Hornback, who happens to be the father of our esteemed principal over here. This Strong Schools Maryland has a network of folks across the state who are building support in their community to get their voices heard in the community. There is, I know there's a coalition of business leaders, some here in Baltimore, who recognize that it probably means in some way they're going to have to pay more money, but they are writing letters to our elected officials to let them know that this is just vital for the future of our state. I think as the state comes to understand, comes to grips with this, there's something that we have to take into consideration when we think about the cost. Because if we do this, I would argue in some sense it pays for itself. And it pays for itself because it's well known, documented, irrefutable research shows that as education levels rise, incomes rise. So the state collects more revenue. Healthcare costs go down. Public safety costs go down. Just think of one statistic. The National Institute of Justice did some research, and the result of that research is that they estimate that $45 billion is taken out of the U.S. economy every year because of incarceration. That's the cost of incarceration plus the loss of income for those who are incarcerated. Now let's correlate that to Maryland. That's $9 billion. If we can capture, just because of the increased education level, 1/3 of that money, it would pay for the whole thing. So when we think about the cost, we've got to think of this issue not just in the dollars for this particular, this report, but the fact that it creates savings and a better quality of life for all of our citizens. So I urge you, if you believe in these recommendations, get connected to one of these organizations that are banding together to get the word out. And yesterday, I'm sorry, I'm going wrong. I was speaking. I was giving the report to members of the General Assembly, the House and the Senate, and I must say, people are thinking about, concerned about the cost, but there is an enormous amount of support in the General Assembly for this initiative. There were 8 members of the General Assembly on this initiative. When we voted a week ago last Thursday, the vote was unanimously yes with 2 abstentions. So you've got this broad base of commission with business leaders, education leaders, collective bargaining representatives, members of the General Assembly, all coming together, and they know what the cost is, coming together and saying, without dissent, we need to do this in our state. So, if you believe in this, make your voices heard.
Thank you. So I'm going to have a couple of questions about restorative practices, which I will ask Karen Weber to start. If other people want to jump in, that's great. One was about what will it take to really implement restorative practices in city schools, and then another was pointing out that restorative practices in city schools are woefully underfunded. So I'm going to let you answer that, but speak slowly so I can speak for 2 minutes.
The truth of the matter is that even though 15 schools came online with city schools this school year, and an additional 17 Positive School Center at the University of Maryland School of Social Work. And that's 32 schools experience amazing. This is a process that started back in 2007. So BTP was ahead of the curve. What we wanted for the longest time is for people to follow the leader. If we've seen that this amazing change has taken place in our local schools, in the BCP schools, why wouldn't we just bring this about for the entire district? And I want to glad Muriel Berkeley, who is on the school board, help the district decide that we are going to become a restored practice district. And even though that's on paper, and it's in our board grant, we've got to put our money where our mouth is. And not only do we have to come up with the funding, but I think more importantly, we have to state the will over and over again. It can't be watered down. It can't be done as an afterthought. It has to be presented to every person in the district, and it has not been. There are whole swaths of the community that have not been applied, haven't even seen a video of what restorative practices look like in a district. And I'm talking about the people who would be implementing, teachers, principals, the ILEDs. All of these people have got to be applied and brought in so that we have buy-in. If the buy-in is happening on the top, it will happen throughout the district. If it's not, it's going to be on a case-by-case basis. As a teacher, the thing that saved my life was restorative practice. My first year in the classroom, I was like a born-again teacher. I had never taught before. I was not the youngest person on the block. And I was drowning because I was bored, the kids were bored, everybody was bored until I learned about restorative practices. And then I had a community in my classroom, and I stayed in education. I didn't plan to stay, but I'm still working in education. Until we offer that to all teachers in our school system, we're going to continue to have the revolving door that's been spoken about. We're going to continue to have children who are also bored and disengaged. So what will it take? Number one is the will, because it is, and Brit and I spoke before that, and said this is low-hanging fruit. You don't have to be a genius to ask the kid, well, why are you fighting? Why is your head on the desk right now? And not in an accusatory way. Why were you absent from the meeting? What's going on? Can I help you? Just changing the mentality of how we approach children will change the outcomes for children.
I just want to add real quick, I mentioned Karen, I may have said something about it when I made my presentation, but the commission is recommending that restorative practices become part of the curriculum of every teacher preparation program and the certification process for teachers. More than that, it is part of its recommendations are that all current teachers are trained in restorative practices, and that's part of the funding that's included in our funding recommendation. So there is hope that there could be money for this to be done full scale.
And actually that is lovely, because that leads into another question that we had, which was, I think, for you, which is about how much of the, if any of the $325 million initial funding is geared towards restorative practices.
Well, all of this, the funding is jumpstarting the commission recommendation. So there is no funding allocation specifically for restorative practices in the first year, but this is a 10-year program. It's got to be built into the curriculum for the teacher prep programs. That can't be done in this coming year. There's the money is going into a significant investment. The largest portion of the money is going to schools that are serving struggling learners, and it would be particularly schools serving high concentrations. That's what the next money
Thank you. Okay, so this wasn't focused on any one person, but I'm going to modify it slightly and send it down the table to Principal Gaither. I think you may be well positioned, based on what we heard about your incredible growth in your standardized test scores and whatnot. The question is about skeptics
do think that the notion that the focus on the whole child is in tension with the emphasis on academic performance, part testing, et cetera. How would you address those skeptics?
So I'm clear that skeptics are saying that we're doing the whole child thing in order to address.
You know, that people think that the whole child approach is contradictory to focus on academic goals. And
First,
standardized
trying to keep
testing.
a sneer and a mocking look off my face. So I guess I would, if I was trying to truly convince these skeptics, demonstrate to them with data from either Wolfe or any number of other places what the power of having eyeglasses and teeth that don't hurt and not getting enough sleep each night can do for academics.
Let me just add a little bit, because I want to make sure that we're getting at the heart of the question, which I think was about the incredible, especially through the education reform period, the emphasis that has been placed on standardized testing as a mechanism for measuring student outcomes. So do you see a tension between that and focusing on the whole child?
Yeah, I absolutely would say I don't see a tension there. I would stress that the information, the data that Dr. Kirwan shared about the results that we are currently getting with our current and historical approach to education, which is basically, well, we're testing reading and math, so let's do more reading and math, has resulted in a nice middle of the pack result. And that furthermore, when you look at those high achievers, you see that they are paying attention to the whole child. And challenge them in some sense, if I was in a debate or a conversation with them, to name somebody who would be okay with ignoring these issues in their own child. I would like to challenge the state legislature, or I think I might have even said it to the commission when I went down there one time. That everybody in this room here, everybody at the commission meeting, everybody in Annapolis would agree with the statement that their child should take their glasses to school on the day the test is being given. They'd probably agree with the statement that they should take their glasses to school every day. That it's not okay to not take the glasses. Yet, when it comes to having to provide money for poor kids to be able to do this, the question comes up, well, how do we know that that really is going to make a difference? And so to a certain degree, I would pose the moral and common sense question, and then I would say, look at the data.
Dr. Kirwan, do you want to add anything?
Just on the standardized testing, we did learn that these high performers don't do nearly testing at nearly the level we do in the U.S. I think the commission believes we way over that. Now, a certain amount of assessment and testing is important, but you have to know where you are. So that's why I think the NAEP exam, the 4th, the 8th grade, that gives us good information. But the difficulty is that this annual testing is mandated basically by the commission did say that the state should, when the door is open, the state should decrease the amount, not get away from, but decrease the amount of assessment and testing. It's overdone, is the sense that we looking at how high performers do their work.
Yeah,
It's something as a former principal, what I know for a fact is that you cannot teach nor can you learn in chaos. And some of our schools are doing extremely well, and some of our schools are struggling. Some of our schools have had 5 principals in 4 years, and the kids are reflecting the chaos that they've seen in our community. And until you settle the community and make a community feel like they belong, and we want them to be there and address their specific needs, we will not have
great. I think when there was the comment about over-testing, I heard a yay and an amen out there somewhere, so that resonated with at least some of us here. This is sort of a broad question, and I'm going to throw it out and let any of you answer it. Please discuss the boy-girl education gap. So we've mentioned race, poverty, other factors that are sometimes looked at in subgroups, but we haven't really talked about gender so far. So I appreciate this question, and I wonder if anyone wants to speak to that.
I'll touch on it just in that I think that my answer sounds too bold, but the idea of how to approach that, how I would approach that, is through that idea of great strategy. If a school identifies that there is a boy-girl gender gap, if a school identifies that there is a economically based gap, whatever that may be, having the folks who can both establish a relationship with the community so that this is evident in the first place and it isn't hidden, because sometimes data doesn't always show exactly what is there. And then having that dedicated person to be able to develop the systems and the structures to deal with it versus trying to go individually to each kid and improve that one kid. So I think that having a strategy like community schools, having a strategy like restorative practices, those approaches allow you to both identify what the problem is and address it on a systems level, so that the next year a girl arrives at school or a boy arrives at school or a poor student or a Spanish speaker who you don't even know yet, there will be a system already in place to deal with that. And I think that those systems development really allows for long-term gains versus short-term outcomes of talking to this group of students who are underperforming. And we're going to help you by tutoring or whatever increase your performance. There's these other strategies that allow you to get to root issues without structure.
Aaron, I'm wondering if you might want to address this from your vantage point and some of the work around the sort of practices and also the research that's done around girls.
I think that what we focused on has been how African American girls are treated differently than white girls. So in the past, they think African American girls have been compared to African American boys. But when we look across the aisle and see how African American girls are punished versus how white young ladies are punished, there's an incredible gap. I think we have to see our discipline policies in ways that make sense. It doesn't make sense to compare the girls to the boys in those instances. African American girls tend to be overly punished for things like dress code violations, for having curvaceous bodies and being told to cover those bodies up. More recently, for hairstyles, I don't know why that's the one that gets me every time. For how you wear your hair. Discipline codes that say girls can't wear braids or extensions. And that's directly affecting African American girls. So I think we have to unpack some of the things that were allowed to occur that are racist and sexist. One thing that I will say that I found interesting, I went to a school center site where they're using restorative practices, and they're during the circles, they break the boys and the girls out separately. And I'm not saying that that's how it should always be done, but I'm watching that to see what are the results. Are people more comfortable in those circumstances? Are there things we're missing? But I do think that we do have to start experimenting with the gender issue. I will say though that the most prominent issue that I see in the United States and in Baltimore City is one that deals with race and poverty.
We had a couple of questions about early childhood and particularly for universal pre-K. And so I want to start by asking, and this is probably for you, Dr. Kirwan, but if this were enacted, is there enough capacity to actually implement it? And what would it do to class sizes with that?
Right. Yeah, great question. And, I mean, there are a couple of issues that the commission thought about carefully with regard to the early childhood education. The full-day preschool for all the way from 3 to 4-year-olds, and for 4-year-olds, a sliding scale of payment to a certain level we recognize right away that we don't have the capacity in the public schools to do this. Fortunately, we have a lot of private sector providers for preschool. This then raises the question is how do you have some quality control over what the preschools are doing? Because there's good research that shows that just having preschool without some quality standard doesn't lead to the results that we would hope to achieve. And so the commission has, there's a standard that's been set up through research on early childhood education. Probably some of you all know about the Excel standard. And so what the commission has said is that in the early years, every preschool, whether public provider or private provider, has to be at least at Excel 3. But within several years, the state would only support preschools at the Excel level 5. And there's pretty excellent evidence that preschool at that level has a significant impact on getting kids into kindergarten ready to learn. And that's really the goal of the preschool portion of our
So actually, this is a good follow-on to that, maybe, because another person was questioning whether we're aware that there are countries with high literacy rates where kids get into schools early, but they don't have academics until the age of 7. So they don't impose curriculum on students that their brains aren't ready to handle. So is there a tension between the sort of standards and the emphasis on the early education, or how would the commission sort of encourage support for the whole child, even pushing out the previous?
Excellent question. I mean, there's no question that you don't want the regimen in a preschool to be like the regimen in the 3rd and 4th grade. So there is a balance to be struck between the socialization, the whole child development, building sort of what we call soft skills in children, and mixed with academic learning. And our understanding is that this Excel benchmark addresses those issues. So, I mean, obviously, you could go overboard on the academic, and that wouldn't be helpful. So we do stuff that a 3 or 4-year-old is ready for. So I think high quality preschool, by our definition, is one that strikes the right balance between helping kids get ready to learn, while at the same time building the social skills necessary.
Anyone want to add?
I just want to say something about secondary school. I find that some of my colleagues in the funding world always want to try things out in the early grades, thinking that if kids are okay when they're little, they'll be fine for the rest of their lives. It doesn't really work like that. And I guess what I want to emphasize is that children need support at every level of their development. And it's not too late when they're in high school. There's some people who come into high school thinking the bad ones are going to stay bad, the good ones are over. It doesn't sort like that. There's still children, even when they look like young men and women, they're still children.
hasn't been asked in the cards I have here, but I'm going to take the prerogative of the moderator to push us in this direction. We've touched on race equity a little bit, but as we think about how we nurture the whole child and how we construct schools and school systems that can support the whole child approach, how do you think about issues of race and cultural responsiveness, implicit bias? How do those things factor into the planning, the work that needs to be done, and how we think about the whole child approach?
So the issue of race is so sticky, and oftentimes there are people who are performing the training who may or may not be as equipped as they should be to have the conversation. And there is always a fear that what's being perpetuated is either stereotypical or incendiary. And neither of those will work. So having the right trainer in the room is number one, and it's probably the hardest thing to do. That said, we can't shy away from talking about race, especially in a city that is 65% African American, and where our student population is 85% African American. We've got to have those conversations, and we've got to come abreast of what the best practices are, or become culturally relevant to the children in the room. One of the ways that we can do so most easily, in my opinion, is by having high interest books that refer to the children who are in the room, and to use restorative circles to do not only reading with the analysis. It's very, to me, low-hanging fruit, but it's something that comes and goes. It comes and goes. Sometimes we have high interest libraries, then they all go away, and we're reading about black people from the 1950s. So that might be exciting to me, but for your average 14-year-old, it really is not. So what is high interest? Are we putting those types of books in front of children? Are children, so I will say one thing, we use restorative practices when I took over a middle school that was a failing school. And the biggest problem is that the literacy rates were really, really low, and the children were really, really older. So some of the children were as old as 16 in a 6th grade class. What have we done to children? That's a whole other story. One of the things we began was a book club. We got funders from the outside to bring in high interest books. And to me, I knew he succeeded when the books started getting stolen. So then what we did is we had children in circles, in small circles, because every teacher in the school had to participate. And in those circles where the children were not good readers, teachers did the reading so they could hear fluency. The reading level for the entire school went up by 1 grade level. This is low-hanging fruit. The ways of doing this are out there. When are we going to have the will?
This is such an important question. I mean, the issue of equity, both based on income and race, was paramount in our thinking and discussion. We actually hired a consultant, a gentleman by the name of Dr. Colston, who's a professor at Howard University. He was ran in the Obama administration. He ran the White House initiative on historically black colleges and universities. He runs something called Quality Education for Minorities, a very prominent not-for-profit entity. So he came and spoke with the commission, and then he read through all of our recommendations through the lens of race equity, and made recommendations for changes in our report, which we adopted in every case. So in our report, for example, obviously one of the things that has to happen is that if we prepare teachers, they have to have the skills and knowledge and cultural competence to interact successfully with the students in their classroom, not maybe the kids they went to college with. And so it but there's no question, we need to significantly diversify our teaching force. We need many more teachers of color in the classroom. And so one of the recommendations is to put some special emphasis on our HBCUs and their teacher preparation programs to expand. There is one of our recommendations on transforming the teaching profession is a campaign to let young people know that it's going to be a different day in the teaching profession, and it can be a very attractive career for them to follow, and sort of target some of this recruitment and the scholarships to students of color to increase, as I said, diversity. But it is such an important issue, and you know, we've done our best through the work of Dr. Colson and others that we've done to try to be responsive to this.
We only have about a minute left, but if you want, you know, this question mark here. Do you have a comment you want to?
I mean, just, I guess I would say that to look at the process of dealing, whether it's racial equity or gender equity, as a long-term problem, that I think that we've seen examples nationally and locally where folks get entrenched where they are. And so I think that there are ways that you have to look at this as a development over time to develop the correct approach.
Great. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. But I want to thank everyone for being here, and particularly thank our panelists for listening.